Everybody, welcome to updates from Southern Plains for 2017. And here is our agenda for today. We're going to be talking about just some general updates and things going on across Southern Plains, a recent survey I completed, some monitoring updates, some general reminders and information, as well as some changes happening in sped forms. So one thing you may have heard is a rumor that Jackson County Central would be joining Southern Plains next year for 2017-18. That is not going to be happening. We have been having some conversations with them. They heard great things about the staff within our member districts and would like to join us. Well, we need a little more time to come up with a plan for that. And there is a possibility that could happen for 2018-19, but there's a lot of conversations that would need to happen prior to that. So there are a lot of changes going on for 17-18. You'll see a number of staff changes. Lisa Ellingson will be retiring, and Deb Bertram will be taking her position. Lisa is currently a coordinator at Blue Earth and United South Central, and Deb will be stepping into that position. Deb is a special education teacher at Martin County West with 32 years of experience, and Deb will be a great asset and really be helpful to fill into that position, and we look forward to having her step into this leadership role. Jane Catava is a school nurse working with Winnebago, Truman, and Grenada, and she will be retiring this year. We're just working on some fine-tuned details of her position, and that will be posted shortly. Susan Krieger is retiring as well. She's a speech pathologist for Tremont and Truman. Kendra Maddox is taking her position. Kendra's been working as a community expert for the last year in birth to 3. However, Kendra is licensed as a speech language pathologist and will be a great fit in Susan's position. Amy Pearson has resigned. She's a school psychologist working in Blue Earth and United South Central, and we wish her well. And Karen DeWar is not, and she will have some positions that are posted. We have an ECSE position, and we do have a couple of apps. I'm doing some interviews this week. If we're not able to have those individuals, we are looking for a psychologist and a psychologist. I recently what can we improve on and that kind of thing. And I wanted to share a lot of feedback. People responded, but I really appreciated your input. And I'm going through people are pretty comfortable and feel that we are doing a good job, particularly paperwork. Huge improvement in that. I'm very comfortable with paperwork. Academics is the next most comfortable area. Behavior is an area that we can work on. Again, feel that things are going very well, but we use some more skills in the area of behaviors. So I will be working on that in the near future. Generally, everybody feels that special education services are going very well, both when I asked about specific disabilities and services for students, as well as services that are provided by Southern Plains staff. Coordinators, generally everybody really appreciates. I think everybody knows how incredibly valuable these positions are, and everybody's generally very pleased. We can never be 100%. One of the comments, several of the comments were basically that we kind of need them to be able to phone themselves. Didn't say that outright, but they need to be everywhere. We do appreciate that they are so valuable. We have a lot of coordinators. Unfortunately, they can't be everywhere at once. The number one priority, just to clarify to everybody, is the number one priority has been identified as due process, particularly this year as we're going through compliance monitoring with the Minnesota Department of Ed. That is a very important part of their position, and that does become the priority. There were a number of comments about paperwork parties. I want to clarify a few issues. One thing is that we need to make sure we have 15 to 20 to make these cost effective. So when we get comments about having more of them or in more locations, the problem we have is that it's not cost effective for us to have them if we don't have a minimum of 15 people. I'd really like to see that closer to 20. We have seen kind of a decrease in the number of the people participating in those, and so we may have to take a look at those in a different way. Possibly we may not be able to provide as many in the future, but just to also clarify is you are welcome to go to any of those paperwork parties. They are not limited. I realize that travel is not ideal. However, again, in order to keep them cost effective, we need to have the numbers there. There were some comments on the facilities that Southern Plains rents. We currently have all of our alternative programs in the Winnebago School Building, and we are having some conversations about facilities. We are not trying to throw a lot of money into the building. However, the reality is all buildings, even say your own home, occasionally you will have to do some investment in a building. Nothing against Blue Earth. They created a great building for us. They have done a nice job keeping that building secure so that there aren't leaks in the building or that kind of thing. The building is good structurally. However, there hasn't been a lot of long-term maintenance on that building, and it really needs that long-term maintenance. So we are looking at possibilities. We're not looking at just throwing things in and making things fancy or anything that way. It's really just the structural pieces to make it usable for our needs. Things like the hotel where they haven't upgraded in a number of years, you'll find there's just not enough plugins. We had that a couple weeks ago. That's an issue that we deal with on a regular basis, and we just need to do some of the basic upgrades and have a plan about that. So there are some conversations going on, and if anybody has any thoughts on that, or I could get a few $1 million, I would really appreciate it. Again, we're not looking at anything extravagant, just things that we can do to maintain the building and get it up to code. As long as we're talking about the Winnebago programs, there were a lot of very positive reports about Winnebago. A couple of the comments were things about it's too hard to get into the programs and not always a smooth transition out of the programs. And so we can work on those pieces, but I do want you to be aware of some data. I've been taking a look at the data about where our students are getting special education services. So setting one is when students are in the mainstream classroom for 80% or more of the day. And you will see that our districts are kind of in the 50 to 60%. The state average is 53%. The nationwide average is 64%. And we are definitely not extremely high. We are okay in that area. Now, students need to be serviced in their least restricted environment. Setting one may not be that least restricted. Sometimes they need more services and they need more opportunities to be in smaller settings. Setting two is when they're in 21 to 60% of the day. And setting three is when they're in the mainstream classroom very little, 40% or less of the day, but they still have access to their peers. So it could be a classroom where they're in a self-contained classroom all day long, but they still come in the morning with their peers. They're in the same school building. Our school districts are not very big, so we don't have a lot of students in that type of setting. We often end up in a setting 4 setting. And you will see we've had a huge increase in most of the districts over the last few years where we're seeing students going into a setting 4 program and not seeing that same increase statewide. So now we also have to be careful about interpreting this information. For example, Grenada Huntley East Chain, of the special education students that are identified within the district, 11% of them attend a setting 4 program. The reality is for Grenada Huntley East Chain, that's 2 of their special education students. And they happen to be two of our most severely autistic students in this PALS program. So clearly they're not over-identified. 4.4 of their special education students are serviced in one student who came already on a IEP. So I'm not members of I just need to be aware of them. You're all aware we've in the most recent, and we are doing all we can to address that. That's one of the reasons why we need to make sure we're providing more training and staff development on how to address behaviors. I wanted to share this information with you. We are under students that are have quite a few programs. Our co-op functioned on a model where if there is a need for a program, we set it up for those most severe, if that's what is necessary. And we don't have waiting lists. Most co-ops have very lengthy waiting lists to get into a setting for, and that can actually result in an increase in numbers in setting 4. So just a few interesting pieces as we've been having these discussions. With monitoring, we are pretty close to being completed for this year. We had a validation by the Minnesota Department of Ed to make sure that the coordinators and I had reviewed files accurately. And they really found that we had errors. There were a few issues with present levels of performance, and we did get those fixed. We overall really have had very good luck with monitoring, and we're very pleased with how we're doing the paperwork. That was an area that we need to do some significant get them completed in a timely manner, and that they have good data. Some legal updates that are going on. I had mentioned a Supreme Court case that was being heard related to special education, and the Supreme Court did come out this past week with a ruling and found that they have overturned what was called the Rowley case. Rowley identified that special education students only needed to make de minimis progress. However, in this case, they really said, no, if a student is in the mainstream classroom for a good portion of their day, say setting 1, and has fairly average intellectual abilities, we want to see more than de minimis progress. We really want to see them make at minimum, a year's progress. I don't feel this particularly would impact what we do in Minnesota. We've always had a standard where we need to help students make good progress. The problem is that when we have a case like this, it sets advocates out to help set that bar. And the only way to figure out exactly what the new difference is having a variety of court cases that are going to help us determine that. So for us, one of the pieces that's going to be very important, again, is the data and making sure that we're collecting good data on students. If students are not making progress, that you hold IEP meetings and you address that lack of progress. There are some potential changes in Minnesota law regarding special education. A couple of the hot topics that are going on out there in Minnesota is the ABS license. The Academic and Behavioral Strategist license is a license that allows special education teachers to work with mild to moderate students, LD, EDD, DCD, ASD. However, current law in Minnesota requires that an individual who graduates with an ABS has to get an anchor license, an LD, EDD, ASD, DCD license within 5 years. This is the only license in the state of Minnesota that requires this type of going back to school. There become issues with seniority, continuing contract rights within districts. And the other problem that I'm finding is, as I talk to high school students, the idea of getting a bachelor's degree is overwhelming, and then when they have to go back to school within 5 years is really a turnoff. And many students are not going into special education because of that. So we are hoping to get that changed so that an individual can complete their education with an ABS license, and the only time that they would need to have an anchor license, say an EBD or an ASD license, would be if they were working with students with more severe needs, particularly in programs such as Winnebago. Another piece of legislation that has continued to pop up a number of times over the last few years, and the governor continues to push for, is a statewide due process system, such as SPED forms, but would be statewide, and all districts would need to use that. That there was some funding for that, it never went anywhere, and now that funding has been. The governor continues to push for it as a paperwork reduction method. I'm going to tell you that I don't see where that's going to reduce paperwork. SPED forms is what it does, and much better than the days that I had. Show my age. Paperwork, and you had to rewrite the student's name and address and that kind of thing. But the reality is, what takes paperwork, what takes your time, is entering all of that information. The way to reduce paperwork is to reduce the amount of requirements we have, such as removing objectives, removing having to write the summary of the summary in the evaluation report. Those are the pieces that will help us reduce the amount of paperwork that we have to do. Some general reminders at this time of year is if you have any students that are going to be moving on to a new case manager next year, remember that you need to make sure that that evaluation or IEP is redone if it's due before November 1st of next year. So double check your timelines and make sure that if there are any IEPs or evals due by November 1st, and you anticipate that student would move on to a new case manager, we need you to get that completed. IEP team membership attendance. There are required members, and then there are non-required members, such as related service providers. Although related service providers are not required team members, that does not give you permission to just get up and leave during the IEP meeting. I've had a number of complaints about this recently in cases where we've had high controversy, severely involved students, and that type of thing. And there have been numerous team members that have really just gotten up and left an IEP meeting. This becomes a significant issue for parents. You need to plan on staying till the very end of the IEP. If on a rare occasion you're unable to stay till the end of the IEP meeting, you still should acknowledge that prior to the meeting, talk to the parent about that, make sure that all of your information is covered during that meeting before you leave, and make sure all team members know at the beginning of the meeting that you're going to have to leave and at what time. But this should be a rare event. Let's try to get those IEP meetings moving on. I know that you have a lot of them, and I know that some of them can go very long. Let's try to get the meetings to go quickly and efficiently, still addressing all components, but we really can't have you, we need to be careful about setting a negative tone to the parent that their child is not important by getting up and leaving during the meeting. Extended school year, please double check that if you have any students who have more data needed on their IEP, that needs to be changed to yes or no before the end of the school year. A reminder that on April 1st, SPED forms needs to be up to date, and prior to that time, you should send us a copy of your combined report, your workload analysis, and yours and any paraprofessional schedules. ECSE teachers, please remember if you have students that are going into kindergarten next year, you should be inviting the service provider who will service that child in kindergarten. You can work with the coordinator if you have questions on that. Invite them to the IEP meeting or to the progress report meeting this year so that you have a good transition plan going into kindergarten, and the kindergarten special education service provider has input into the service delivery for the following year. I'm always looking for tips and ideas out there, and thanks so much to Betsy Schultz and Cindy Copas who sent this video. It's a training where you can go on and access this free training, and it has a lot of great strategies on working with students with behavior needs. With that being our theme, uh, we have done some research on that and that kind of thing. And this video really has some great strategies in there, and many of them are very research based. So please take a few minutes and check it out. And be prepared if you really want to complete it. It is fairly lengthy, but again, really great strategies. I do have a link to that on the Southern Plains website under this video, so you can access it there. And some updates going on in SpedForms. About once a month, SpedForms does do an update, and sometimes it's a scavenger hunt to find out what are some of those updates. So I'm going to share a few of those with you at this time. Okay, under the prior written notice, find my way to the prior written notice. You will find a box to document that the parent received a copy of the procedural safeguard. Here is the box at the bottom of the prior written notice. Now, if you complete this or not, this does not print. The only way this is actually documented is if when you finalize the form, this information would be finalized on the form. You can really ignore this box. This is why we put this on the team sign-in page. We need that for third-party billing purposes anyway. So just because I've had a few people questioning about this, you can just ignore that. You don't need to worry about that page. Let's go take a look at the IEP as well. A few changes happening there. So one of those is altered school day. If you have a student who has a shortened school day for some reason, that is an IEP team decision. It is a big decision. A shortened school day is a big deal. Again, I'm showing my age. Back in my day, the commissioner had to actually sign off on it if you were going to have students on a shortened day. So this would be something you would only do if at a minimum you have talked to the coordinator about this. It should in most cases be a temporary plan where we're trying to continually increase that time. But if you do have a student on an altered school day, you're going to check the box and put the reasoning for that in this box. So for example, if the student is medically fragile and is just too exhausted, you would want to discuss that you received input from a doctor on that. A doctor does not have a right to make that decision. It is still an IEP team decision. And what's being done to try to increase the length of day, and that has impacted the student's endurance as a result. The student is on a shortened day. Sometimes we will use this strategy with behavioral issues. You would want to explain that as well. It's just sensory overload, and the student is in school, higher degree of behaviors, restraints, and we want to avoid those and keep the student positive. You also probably want to be looking at in this box about any increase the length of the assessment pages. There are a number of changes on the assessment pages. It has gone down to 2 pages. It's trying to reduce the number of pages and streamline this. There is a box just for handy information that the parents have requested in writing that the child not participate in state testing. Now, you should not encourage parents to do this. One of the pieces of legislation that's being considered is that school district funding would be dependent upon how many students participate in MCA tests. So it's a particularly important time, but we should never, sometimes by our even informing parents they have a right to refuse the testing. Parents will take that as a hint that they think they should be refusing testing, and I don't want to do that. But if they do, this is a way to document that information. As I mentioned, the pages are reduced. If there's any other, sorry, I am double checking if we have any other changes on there. The accommodations page of the IEP if you haven't noted this, is this classroom accommodate adaptations and modifications page. This was just realigned a little bit to make things a little clearer. I want to explain this page. This is only used as information for the classroom. Print it off and attached to the IEP. We want to avoid that because it's really just reiterating information that's already on the IEP and gets confusing to parents. So the only purpose of this is just to print off and give to general education teachers, paraprofessionals, or others that would have to know in this information. In the report section, I want to point out there is a quick report to help you find any students that need to have extended school year or more data needed. So it's called ESY. And I unfortunately don't have any students in my list, but this will bring up a list and show you which ones have yes, to make sure that programming is set up for those students. You need to make sure that there is a program developed for the students. And if it says more data needed, then you need to make sure you have an IEP meeting prior to the end of the school year clarifying. I think I've hit all of the updates. Sorry. Thank you so much for all you do. Good luck as we start hitting spring fever. Continue to keep your focus on instruction and getting students busy and occupied, because that will help us reduce behaviors as the year proceeds. When we start shutting down, kids start shutting down. So keep that focus on instruction, and thank you for the difference you make for kids every day. Have a great day.